everybody joining us. It's a great week to start D2 football. I remember exciting weekend to kick things off. Brandon, with you. So I'm getting a little feedback from one of our participants.
Brandon, we're having a hard time hearing your mic a second ago.
Yeah, well, I stopped talking because there was some feedback with one of our participants. I don't think it might have been Chris because I got you. Figured out what it is. All right, there we go. Are we good now, guys?
Sounds good here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, no worries at all. All right, Brandon Meisner, Chuck Bittner, Matt Witwicky, Justin Polizzi, Chris Ferguson. Chuck Witt and Kay Ferg. If you've never met Justin before, he's the new Gulf South columnist. Wanted to join us tonight. We're really happy to have him. So, men, like I was saying, it's been a great start to the football season so far. I can't remember a more exciting weekend. There were some great non-conference games and great games as a result. You know, sometimes they don't live up to their billing, but they did this weekend. Let's start with West Florida. West Florida goes to McNeese State and knocks off McNeese. So who had a chance to watch it, and what were your thoughts on the game?
I kind of just kept up with it a little bit on Twitter. One of the guys who went to Bowie State actually is one of the broadcasters there now for the local TV station. And I think the thing that kind of noticed is really West Florida kind of jumped on McNeese pretty early, and they didn't let up. I think they ended up going up by 2 scores at one point. And it was kind of like a heavyweight battle, and they kind of stood toe-to-toe with them, you know. And so I think that was pretty amazing. And I also noticed that, you know, I'm here in Louisiana, you know, about 100 and so miles away from McNeese. It's hot. If you're not used to this heat, it is really difficult to hold up. But West Florida, you know, is about 3 hours to my east, and they're used to this heat. So I think there's an advantage that really got neutralized for McNeese with this game. So it was amazing to see, even without the depth of that McNeese had, the scholarship advantage, how West Florida just stood toe-to-toe with them.
Yeah, I ended up watching a fair amount of that today on ESPN Plus, the replay of it. And I think all of us kind of expected that they were going to jump on them and be able to, you know, have a lot of success throwing the ball, and they did. You know, West Florida's defense is, you know, they're gonna give up some points, but they're going to score a lot. And, you know, they've got real good quarterback play, as we saw a year ago in their championship run. So I wasn't really real surprised by this. I know that sometimes this gets characterized a little bit. You know, when you have an FCS team and a D2 team that's some upset or something like that. I think most of us kind of felt pretty comfortable taking West Florida. Justin, what did you know, being the columnist there, what did you see?
Well, you know, I watched a good part of that game, and I really thought I was impressed with West Florida offensively. They did a lot of really good things. I thought Austin Reed looked like he hasn't missed a step offensively, just with his receivers, really good. Has a really good rapport with them because he knows where they're going to be when they're going to be there. And I was really disappointed in McNeese State's defense. They looked sluggish watching it on TV. Thought they looked sluggish and just couldn't keep up with the West Florida offense. Defensively, I think you hit nail on the head. They're going to give up points, but you have to slow down the offense because they're gonna outscore you. That's their game plan. They're not going to hide it. That's what they're going to do, and that's what they went out and did. I thought West Florida. I thought they looked really, really good for not having played in almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of us were surprised by anything that happened. In fact, we closed this show last Sunday night. That was the last thing we talked about. We kind of threw this out and said, you know, hey, our number one team's playing a Division I program. How do we feel about that? And I think we all felt they're going to win the game. Props to you. You went all in and said, I'm very confident that they win this game. And Chris and I were a little less sure, but we agreed that they were going to win. And nothing that happened surprised me. So a couple of takeaways for that. Austin Reed is awesome. He had a big day. when we get later in the season, if he's had an incredible season, which we all expect him to, that's definitely one of those things that you look at as a major achievement or a major milestone when it comes to Harlan Hill candidate assessment and voting. To have the kind of day that he did against a 63 scholarship team, that's the kind of thing that really moves the needle. So that's a big result for him and for the team. Now, to bring it back down to earth a little bit, the thing that they have to remember as a team is that, as impressive as that was, and as we're so happy that they played him, we're happy that they won. What they have to remember as a team is that it really doesn't help them towards their goal of a Gulf South Conference championship. It doesn't really help them in their goal to a national championship. It's a great result, but it doesn't count for regional rankings. It doesn't count for conference standings. So they just have to come back to Pensacola and get refocused and get ready for, a couple more non-conference games. And then, of course, the GSC schedule's picking up soon. So awesome result. I am thrilled for them, but they have to make sure that they get focused on the results for the upcoming games.
Well, Matt and I were talking earlier, and one of the things I said to him was that I expect the number one team in Division II to be able to beat what essentially was, I guess, in the spring, a 500 FCS team. Too often people get caught up in the quote unquote level that somebody plays at. There are many FCS teams that I expect to be beaten by many Division II teams. Just like there are many FBS teams that I expect to be beaten by FCS teams. And there are NAIA and D3 teams that can beat Division II teams. It's just the nature of the beast. It's not a list of 1 through 1,000 and they stop between each level. There's a tremendous amount of overlap, and the outcome wasn't surprising. And in fact, as some of you guys kind of alluded to, I thought that West Florida was dominant, and I thought they were actually McNeese was helped by a sequence, and I'm not so sure if this is true or not. I was in the emotions of the game. I thought West Florida was victim to a bad PI call that allowed McNeese drive to extend. They allowed him to extend the drive, and they ended up scoring. And in fact, I thought there was an offensive pass interference on a pick when they scored. I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I wanted others to look at it, and they haven't yet. Nonetheless, that's a kind of game I expect, at least the number one ranked team in Division II to be able to handle, and they did. North Dakota State or South Dakota State, that might be a different story, but a team the level of McNeese State I expect to be able to beat.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a great point. And that wasn't the only Division II upset over Division I over the weekend. Southern Connecticut State beat Central Connecticut. That was a really good win because those schools are not that far apart. So yeah, to your point, it's not something that's so rare that we can't. I mean, we want to celebrate it, obviously, but yeah, I agree with you. I would expect the top team in Division II to be able to beat a mid-tier or lesser FCS team every year.
Yes. This is not the same situation as it was and should not be celebrated the way it was when App State beat Michigan back in the day. This isn't even close to that. This is I even thought about, questioned whether it should even be the top story on the front page, but we'll celebrate this, but time to move on. They should win that game if West Florida is the type of team that we think they are. Let's move on to the top 10 men. Mankato struggled with Northern State. In fact, they had to come back to force overtime and win overtime. Whit, you should know all about this game. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I was surprised, obviously, that Mankato struggled quite that much. I mean, I came on last week and said that I didn't think that Mankato was probably as good as their national ranking of 2 that we currently have them at, just because the fact that they're reloading so much like they are. And we had some evidence of that because while they had 400 yards of offense by halftime, they only had 17 points and it turned the ball over, three times. And when you take a look at this squad, that's not something they've done a lot of in the past. So when you take a stronger look at Northern, it's kind of interesting because they got a brand new head coach, Mike Schmidt, and they're making a lot of changes. They came out with an air raid offense. I watched the first half of the game, this morning, and they didn't do a running play for a few series. They were just chucking it everywhere, bubble, and taking a shot. And I think some of what Northern State was doing, frankly, was taking a look at what West Florida had success with in the national championship game, which was throwing the ball a lot and really trying Mankato in their back half. And they had some success to the point where they got themselves out to a 10-point lead at the end of 3 quarters and just couldn't finish it off. Mankato made some plays at the end of the football game and, had a gutsy call on a 4th down play in overtime to win it. But it certainly does bring into question, is this Mankato team going to be good enough to go undefeated in the Northern Sun and put themselves in a position to have home games in the playoffs like they've had in years past? And I think that really draws a lot of questions that way. Is an Augustana, a Duluth, some other teams like that going to be able to step in and possibly win the Northern Sun this year?
Well, that was one of the questions I had. And I wasn't really concerned about the Northern Sun Championship, although I know that's where your focus is. I was more concerned about is, at least this point in the area, is the wrong NSIC team highly ranked. I mean, the way Augie handled Minot, and I know Minot's not, a world beater, but Augie handled them as easily as you can handle anybody.
Yeah, in going over to the Augustana game Saturday, they only allowed 164 yards offense to Minot, and giving up 164 yards of offense to any team in D2 is pretty impressive, and then throwing up 49 on the other side. So I thought that Augustana probably should have been in our top 25 poll to begin with. And maybe there's a chance they end up getting bumped in after this week because there's going to be some fluctuation, but we'll have to see.
Just to interrupt they were tied with Fort Hays, like one more vote. They were like a point off.
Right.
From getting in. So they were there right around with Fort Hayes, just to interrupt. So
Right.
They were on the edge.
Yeah. So they'll meet soon enough, and we'll get a chance, to find out a little bit more about Mankato real soon. They're heading up to Duluth this weekend. So the Northern Sun is going to be pretty interesting this year because I think most people have kind of seen Mankato as a slam dunk and having home games in the region. And they're going to have to really, really work at it this year with all the reloading they have.
Well, moving on the top 25 poll, take them in order. Ferris State dominated. They absolutely controlled the game, kind of like Augustana did over Minot. Chuck, I know several people have talked about it, but you did some research on it. The quarterback, Jared Bernhardt, pretty, fairly interesting story.
Yeah, very interesting backstory for him and a great introduction for him in college football. I thought that would be probably a close game for a half. Findlay is they're not at Ferris State's level. Ferris is a much better program. They're a little bit deeper. They have better football players, but Findlay is a decent team. And the last time they played in 2019, it was a 1-point game. So Findlay can play football. This game was never really a contest. I mean, Ferris got out to an early lead, and it was 40-14 by halftime, I think. So it was a really, really impressive performance for them, and it was led by their new quarterback, Jared Bernhardt. He is a transfer from the University of Maryland, but he did not play football at Maryland. He was a 4-year lacrosse star for the Terrapins. And in fact, he won the Men's Division I Lacrosse Player of the Year award in just past spring in 2021. So we know he's a phenomenal athlete, and he had an incredible high school career in multiple sports, and he was a triple option quarterback in high school. So he completed his lacrosse eligibility at Maryland, but he still had eligibility to play another sport. And he opted to go to Ferris State, and just incredible to come out in his first game. He obviously hasn't played football in quite a long time. He ran for 4 touchdowns, threw for 3 others, and had a really impressive night. So that's the type of story that if he continues to play well, that can get national media attention because it is such an interesting story. So watch out for him. Watch for his name. If he continues to play well, almost by default, he's going to end up getting attention for the Harlan Hill Trophy. And I think, that's one of those things that, just like the Heisman, we think about that and talk about it all year long. Is he that type of player? I have no idea. We've only seen him play 1 game, but if he continues to play well with that kind of a backstory and at a program like Ferris, he's going to get a lot of attention. So that was a very, very interesting thing to see. So let's keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
Right. Moving on to number 4, Northwest Missouri wins the battle with Hayes. Chuck, you thought maybe Hayes was unranked, but should get some consideration. As we talked about earlier, they were tied with Augustana for like the first spot out or whatever. But pretty defensive game. It really what ended up not being that interesting of a game. And despite of the fact that I'm in the middle of MIAA territory, I really didn't get to watch it because I was updating scores and focused around the country. Did anybody else watch it? I doubt it.
I saw the very end of it, but it didn't really get to see how the game played out.
Gotcha.
Obviously defensive game. And we know that Northwest always brings a ton to the table defensively. But still holding Fort Hays to 7 points on their own field, I think is pretty impressive. Now, I think Northwest has some work to do offensively, but to hold Fort Hays to 7 points at home under the lights, that was pretty impressive to me. I think that Fort Hays has some ball players. I like their quarterback. So, I think Northwest fans might be a little concerned that, they didn't get as much out of the offense as they might like to, but I think that's still a really quality win.
All right, let's move on. Probably what we all thought would have been the game of the week. On Saturday, or was it Thursday? I can't remember at this point. Commerce hangs on for a road win at Pueblo. It was all field goals in the game, 12-6. Some issues with the stream, so I'm not sure. Did anybody else have a chance to look at that one?
I caught a little bit of it towards the end. I was kind of keeping up with the scores anyway with between the two. So remember, Commerce doesn't have their starting quarterback. He's out, Miklo Smalls. And Pueblo, as we kind of saw, had their own offensive issues too. These were really two teams that had really strong defenses. And I think we saw that throughout the game. They could move the ball kind of between the 20s, but not much more than that. They settled for field goals, some missed field goals also. Towards the end of the game was really interesting. Pueblo tried to insert a little bit different quarterback strategy, brought in a freshman who I thought, kind of juiced up the game a little bit. I think that he could be a quarterback of the future in a year or two, or get him a little bit more experience playing. But in the end, I mean, Commerce sort of prevailed. Those four field goals, took them over.
Yeah, if you take a look at it, it was kind of wild. Commerce just got over 200 yards, and Pueblo was at like 155. And Pueblo fans have said for a while that they've got a fantastic defense, but unfortunately not enough firepower offensively once they get in the playoffs. And I think you saw some of that once again here, where when you're only able to muster that much offense up, you're going to have a hard time winning against some of those top teams, and because they clearly, once again, have a very good defense, as they have in many of the last few seasons.
All right, man, let's go ahead and move on then. Looks like we wanted to talk about number 10 Notre Dame beating Ashland in overtime. I thought that was an incredibly interesting game. Again, I was updating scores, so I didn't have the chance to focus, but it was a heck of a game from everything that I saw.
Yeah, I was following that one. I was out at a game that afternoon, yesterday afternoon, but I was following that one because I really thought it was probably going to be the best matchup of the day. And when I got back home, I read up on the results and looked at it. And I looked at the box score. This happens from time to time. You look at the box score, and if somebody handed you that box score without the scoring summary and said, who won the game? I would have looked at that box score and said, well, Ashland won the game. Clearly they won the game. They had more than 250 yards of offense, more than Notre Dame had. It was very disproportionate. They had a lot of mistakes, a couple of turnovers, a little bit of questionable play calling in a few situations. But they on paper had the better day statistically. But Notre Dame was opportunistic. They had a defensive touchdown. They had a special teams touchdown. I think it was a 99-yard kickoff return. And then they got it done in overtime. So really interesting result. Really important for Notre Dame to win that, as a top 10 team. Ashland wasn't ranked, but I think that was another team that we all kind of looked at as possibly on the fringe of the top 25. So really good for Notre Dame to win that one. And Ashland really wanted it. I know they wanted that because now they're playing Ferris this coming weekend. So what a tough way to start their season. You start 0-1, and now you got Ferris coming to town. So that was a really tough loss for them to take, but a great result for Notre Dame.
Well, I had a funny side joke. There used to be a great poster on the message board named Bulldog. He's from Ferris State, and He was one of the guys who last week I explained how I started following Division II through a thing called E-Groups. And he was a Ferris State fan from way back. And he always used to talk about how one team outscored the other, et cetera, et cetera. So a good friend, Tony Nicolette, he used to write the GLIAC column for us, came up with the term, the Bulldog modified scoring system. And so Notre Dame, Notre Dame was the winner in spite of losing the Bulldog modified scoring system. But I think it goes to prove a bigger point about how fantasy football has somewhat ruined the perception of how you win football games. And it's not just about putting up numbers. It's about winning football games. And theoretically, just like tackles are a crap stat. Everybody loves to talk about so-and-so had 125 tackles, 175 tackles. All that means is your defense didn't get off the field. The best defense could have three incompletions and one tackle, and you're off the field. You only had 10 total tackles for the game, but you didn't give up a yard. It's such a anyway. So
a good defense will have half the chances that a bad defense will.
Correct. Exactly. Which is why I hate it when people say he led the country in tackles. That means the rest of your defense sucks, or it just probably means the rest of your defense sucks. Is what it really
when I'm assessing stats on defensive players, I look at things like tackles for loss, sacks, pass breakups, those types of things.
I think it's really important that Chuck, you touched on something, and that is turnovers, because I think there were a lot of that this past weekend, and I think that those teams that have all those extra yards, they're having to make up for those turnovers. And I think you kind of saw that game after game.
Yeah.
By the way, man, I want to interrupt. I see some old friends have joined us. Joe, Eric, Wayne, Mike. I know some of you guys don't know most of them. These are longtime D2 fans, and it's wonderful to have them here with us. So sorry to interrupt that. Do we need to expand anything on how grumpy I can be about stats, or should we move on?
No, the only thing I was going to say to that was just that when you look at the stats and you look at how, like you said, Chuck, I think you said, Chuck, where you look at the stats and, Ashland's going to win that ball game, right? But when you look at the final score, and it wasn't Ashland, but when you outgain somebody and you beat them in every statistical category and you lose the game, it doesn't matter. A win at the end of it doesn't matter if you win by 1 or you win by 100. A win is a win is a win, and that's what counts at the end of the season. That's all that you get rated on is your wins and losses. And so you could, like you said, you could have 250 yards of offense better than everybody else, but if you didn't win the game, does it matter? Or you led the country in tackles, does it matter?
Right.
Wins are the only stat that really gets counted at the end of the day.
Thanks, Ron. All right, let's talk about two top 25 teams that got beat pretty soundly. Central Missouri lost to Pitt State. That was a sound win, and then Carson Newman got hammered by West Georgia. I thought that was a pretty impressive showing by West Georgia, and I don't know if it was on the stream last week or if it was just in our private conversations, but it said that West Georgia at Carson Newman was interesting to me. And but I would not have expected that result. That was pretty impressive by them.
Go ahead, Chuck. I'll let you go. I
was on as the sack columnist. I was on the losing end of that one, so I'll take it on the chin. I'll take it on the chin and go first. So yes, that was very interesting to me. I was one that said that, Brandon, because as a sack columnist, that was the game of the week to watch. Even though West Georgia wasn't ranked and they weren't coming off one of their best seasons, we know the quality of that program. And we fully expected that a David Dean team was going to come into this season much better prepared than the 6-5 team that they were in 2019. So I figured that was going to be a really interesting game. I actually picked Carson Newman to win that, in part because of something that David Dean himself said in his pregame comments, that there's just a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of things that are difficult to prepare for heading into that game. And I actually thought that favored Carson Newman. But having watched the replay of that and listened to a lot of the home broadcast of that, West Georgia soundly outplayed them for one thing, but I think they outcoached them as well. West Georgia had the perfect game plan. They knew where Carson Newman was strong, which was in the defensive line. and they knew where they were vulnerable, which is in the secondary. So they had a game plan to do a lot of very, very quick release passing. The ball was getting out of the quarterback's hands so quick that defensive line never even had a chance to have an impact because their quarterback, new starter, by the way, Harrison Frost, a transfer from, I think, Mercer. Mercer. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
He was just getting the ball out so fast that the defensive line and the linebackers couldn't really make the impact that they're known for. And then they were just letting their receivers make plays and dinking the dunk down the field. And it was just a perfect game plan. And Carson Newman adjusted a little bit, but they just couldn't really get all the way to figuring out how that they were going to defend that. And the result was a really lopsided win for West Georgia.
Hey, Chuck, let me ask you, are you going to continue to make your predictions based off pregame coaches' comments like that?
Yes, I think that is the best way to do it.
Okay. just make sure you save some of those for the end of the show.
Because we know that going into a game, coaches are always very upright, forthright, and honest with us about what they think and what they plan to do.
Yes.
I was listening on the radio today, and somebody, a Division I, like FBS, school did not release their two deep until the start of the game. Like, so even their SID didn't hand them out until the start of the game. And that's my thought process is always, if you've got to do that, you're lost before you start. Anybody that tries to hide information, I think is on a road to ruin, and they're probably not they're going to turn a program around because Nick Saban's Nick Saban's typically not afraid to hand you his roster and tell you how he's going to beat you.
Right. Justin, what were your thoughts of that contest we were just speaking of?
Well, two things. First of all, if you don't want to give the two deep, that's fine. I've watched enough film by the time we get to Sunday game plan. I've watched enough film by the end of the day. You don't have to give me a two deep. I know who your two deep are, and then I know who your backups are, and I know what they do. So at the end of the day, you can take two deep and go kick rocks with it for all I care. But
they're important for guys like us, really.
Well, yeah. For us, it's more important. But as a coach, you don't care. It doesn't matter. Right. I did not have a chance to watch that game. I kept tabs up on the score. I would say that so it was hard, right? Because West Georgia finished 6-5 in 2019, going to Carson Newman, which I've played there. It is not an easy place to go play. When I've coached there, and it's not easy. It's not easy to go into Mossy Creek and get a win, especially against Carson Newman. And when you looked at when I looked at the stats, it was mind-boggling. Just in terms of offense, and 194 yards of offense for Carson Newman. I was shocked. 132 on the ground. That is not a Carson Newman team you're used to seeing. 470 from West Georgia was more on lines of what we expected. I thought Harrison Frost threw the ball well. He 29 of 40 for 316 with 3 touchdowns and interception. So he is as good as advertised, and I just think that's a huge win for West Georgia, going on the road in a tough environment against a really tough team. That's never easy to go over there and pull out a win and beat them pretty handily. So I was impressed with it. When you go through the stats, and Chuck, I didn't have a chance to watch it, but I was just disappointed. I was surprised, not disappointed. Surprised is probably a better word, with the run game of Carson Newman.
Yeah, they've got a little bit of a different approach on offense. I was actually more disappointed in how out of sync their passing game was. That's a big departure for them, but they have the talent to execute a different type of passing offense, and they were just out of sync all night. And that was really just because the Carson Newman offensive line is so young. They had a combined 2 starts going into that game, and West Georgia was just disrupting them on every single play. And as I've never played quarterback at any level of football, but that I'm sure that is in your mind every time you get the snap. That I've got to get the ball out fast. I got to get out fast because I'm just not going to have time to do anything else. And that just had their passing game out of sync all night. And then they just couldn't get anything done with the run either. So very humbling experience for them. It's it's only one game. It's not a conference game, but they have a lot to work on if they want to be a contender in the conference. But West Georgia, let's stay on them for a second. Do you think they're a top 25 team?
I think I'm not going to jump on the boat right now week one, but I definitely think that they showed that they are capable of being a top 25 team. And to me, there's obviously West Florida and Valdosta, your top two, preseason wise, but West Alabama and West Georgia, to me, kind of are the biggest surprises. And I'm not surprised West Georgia did what they did. David Dean coach team, they're usually very, very well. They're coached well, they play hard. And West Georgia has the facilities and the structure set up that they're going to be very successful there. So I think it wouldn't surprise me for them to compete for a conference championship when this thing's all said and done.
In my opinion, if a team, the Gulf South's got enough history that when I see a result like that, I think that that's a top 25 kind of team just because of how good they've had, squads of the recent past. I mean, you take a look at the last few national champions, West Florida, Valdosta, you've got programs that when they're really good, in that conference, they're the best in the nation. So I immediately have them going into the top 25 paired with the idea that there's also some teams that lost in the top 25 that I'm not keeping around. So I think, if you had a situation where everybody in the top 25 won, that's one thing. But I think it makes it very easy for them to move into that conversation myself.
I'm still tabulating the top 25, but I am happy that people, it seems for the first time in a long time, are not married to the preseason poll. I hate the idea that this is a poll is an opinion. It is the average of a bunch of people's opinion. And if somebody is ranked number one to start the season, it does not mean that they deserve to keep it until they lose. And it does not mean they should lose it even if they do lose. There are a bunch of things to consider every week when doing it. So far, I'm happy that I'm seeing some of the things you talked about, Matt, which is, punish people for losing punish people who probably should not have been ranked as high as they were or at all, maybe in a top 25 poll. And I'm seeing the rewarding of people who probably should have been ranked based upon at least 1 week's worth of action.
Well, and I would say one thing too to that, for those of you that don't know, I spent 15 years coaching college football, spent 4 years coaching at Mars Hill University in the South Atlantic Conference, and played a lot of these Gulf South teams as well. There's a lot of unknowns, and that was as I sat down to do the season breakdown, preseason picks, and everything like that. I sat there looking at it. The coaches have never had the opportunity before. Obviously, some schools played last year, some didn't. The schools are allowed to have off-season workouts, but up until this year, this was a one-and-done kind of deal where the coaches were allowed to have off-season workouts with the players. And so I think that there was a lot of unknowns going into this because you just don't know. Some schools scrimmaged, some schools played, some schools did nothing, did inter squads. So as a coach, you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, this top 25 looks great, but there's a lot that is up in the air right now because we haven't seen a lot of people play in 2 years. And I think we will see a handful, a half a dozen or so fall out of the top 25 and teams come in that we weren't expecting by week 4 or 5. I think that there's some teams that lost people, and throw the transfer portal in there too, guys. Oh, yeah. I mean, you put the transfer portal in there, it's insanity. I would not want to be sitting in any one of those school offices right now trying to figure out a game plan or trying to recruit because the transfer portal is throwing a wrench into everything. But when you look at it, and now you look at this top 25 and who won and who didn't and what the scores were close, how close they were, man, I half a dozen teams will be out of top 25 by week 4, week 5. And we'll have new teams in there that we didn't think were going to get there.
I'd say that what's kind of unique too about the way that first week played out is the teams that had the stable coaching staffs that had a lot of returners come, they really excelled in week 1. I think you saw those teams that had new coaches that haven't even coached the first game. They've been there for 2 years, had a lot of turnover because there was a lot of transfers out too. If you didn't play, like I do CIAA, we had a lot of guys transfer out. But culture really mattered. And those who had coaching staffs and they had some resemblance of a team from 2019 come back in, they performed really well. And I know we didn't talk about there are two other teams that I got to really keep up with that played Division I teams. They didn't win, but Bowie State, they got within 6 points. And Virginia Union hung with Hampton well into the fourth quarter, tied at 28, and they went back and forth and seesaw. And they had stable coaching staffs. They had a lot returning, and those teams will do really, really well. But I think those that have so much turnover and didn't get the benefit of off-season practices or coaches not really working a lot with the new coaching staff, it's going to be tough this year, I think. And you may see maybe next year is more their year than this year. Kind of remains to be seen, but I think that's something to kind of keep in mind too.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. And there was a question that came in about just kind of asking as a follow-up to what Justin said. Is this really different from past years? Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are very different from past years. There's just been so much player movement between the end of 2019 and now. The transfer portal, which we don't have access, at least I don't think any of us have access to that transfer portal, but I talked to coaches that do, and they said that transfer portal has never been busier than it was. Like probably this summer was the busiest it's ever been. And there were a lot of guys who were looking for Division I homes. And one coach said only about 25% of the guys that are in there are finding the Division I homes that they want to get. So it's in large part because the NCAA basically gave every athlete another year of eligibility because of the lost year in 2020. So you have the influx of freshmen coming out in 2019, the high school class of 2019. But you don't have the class from the college graduating class moving out or moving on and continuing that cycle. So there's a surplus of athletes for the same number of scholarships and the same number of roster spots. So it is very different. And there's just been a ton of movement. We've seen players transfer twice since the end of 2019. So it is quite a bit different. It's been very, very challenging, and it's probably going to take another year, maybe 2 years before that really cycles through and starts to settle down again.
Chuck, I had coaches that I spoke with in the preseason, right in my preview, that mentioned that some of the athletes almost felt like it was a real kind of sexy thing to be in the transfer portal in itself. So yep. I got to find a way to get myself in the transfer portal. But anyway,
there's no amount of help that portal.
Think these shoulders will get through the portal?
It's not the shoulders we're worried about.
It's funny though.
Whoa, easy.
It seems like every player, just in looking through rosters and the players that we think, it seems like every player was either in his 6th year of college football or it was his first game.
Right.
So there's not as much in between because we have so many players who have freshman or sophomore eligibility, and they're on target to graduate later this year.
Right.
So the thing that's really interesting about that, I was thinking about this because of Austin Reed, who we've talked about already. Austin Reed has sophomore eligibility for football, but academically he may be a senior.
Right.
So I'm not speculating about what his intentions might be, but as someone in his position potentially graduates later this year and could take advantage of the grad transfer rule and have 2 years of eligibility left. So you're still going to see a lot of movement in the next couple of years because of things like that.
Well, and I think too, a lot of people I've talked to, the one thing that they want to do, a lot of coaches want to do is, they're hesitant to put their stats up now because you put your stats up, and now these Division I schools are going to come in and say, look at Austin Reed and say, hey, wait a minute, we need a quarterback. So I can either go the JUCO route, I could go the high school route, or I could turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, here's a quarterback that's proven, plays at a high level, and now he's a grad transfer, like you said, Chuck, and he's there for 2 years. So there's I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on it, and the positives. Obviously, it helps the players, and that's the intention of it. But as coaches, it's hard sometimes to swallow that.
Right. So, coaches, in terms of power balance, forever it's been 98% on the side of the institutions and the coaches, more of the institution than the coach. But there is a balance in that now, and it is funny to see coaches have to lament recruiting players already on their roster. They're essentially talking about I got to re-recruit them every year or else they're gonna leave. Nick Saban doesn't have to worry about that, but probably everybody else in the college football world does. So it's just the new world in which we live. And like I've said before, if a kid was getting 25% or a half ride somewhere, and now he can go somewhere else and get a full ride, good for that kid. There's that's a heck of a lot of money that he's saving by doing that. So, and he might even could theoretically be having a better experience, but that's not always the case. And this is something I wanted to save to the end, but it's a good segue to this. You guys remember Mike Beaudry, the West Florida quarterback from 2017? All right.
I saw him play. Yes.
Yeah. So he transferred to UConn. Didn't see much action there. So I'm updating the scores yesterday, and Simon Fraser just getting their heads beat in by Idaho. And guess who was throwing fourth quarter passes for Idaho up 68-0? That would be Mike Beaudry. So I just thought it was funny. I saw that name and I go, there's no way it's him. So that's a situation. And then to circle back to the transfer portal and transferring, where maybe he would have been beaten out by Austin Reed no matter what. But nonetheless, was his experience been any better at UConn and now Idaho than it would have been at West Florida?
That's a shame because that's a really talented quarterback too.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't see more time at UConn, given all the garbage time they've got.
Is it all garbage time at UConn?
It is now.
All right, very good. So let's go ahead and shift gears, guys. Outside the top 25, great weekend for the Northeast 10, Chuck.
Yeah, I wanted to give a little love to the Northeast 10. We haven't talked about them a whole lot, mostly because they haven't had a ton of success in the playoffs in the last couple of years. And I think maybe in the last playoff season in 2019, I don't know that they had a team that made it.
They didn't.
They didn't have a team that made it. So I was really happy to see them have a good weekend, even though Paul was pessimistic. The Northeast 10 had a great weekend. We already talked about Southern Connecticut beating Central Connecticut, which is a really nice kind of local bragging rights win for them. Interesting contest the way that played out too. So great win for the Owls. Bentley and Westchester have a lot of history. They've played several times in the last few years, and a couple close games and a couple not so close games. But Westchester had won every one of them. I think they were 4-0 or 5-0 over Bentley. So, you kind of expect that it was at Bentley. So you kind of expect, maybe it's a struggle for a half or so, but you feel really good about Westchester winning that game. And Bentley just destroyed them. I can't remember, other than, in the days when Westchester played Delaware a couple of times against a really good Bloomsburg or Shippensburg. I can't remember the last time I saw a Westchester team just get manhandled like that. They're just blown away at the line of scrimmage. And you don't expect that type of physical play from a Northeast 10 team. It's just historically not what they're known for. So really, really good weekend for them. I know Paul's excited. I'm excited for him. It was kind of a big thing to get excited about. So little love to the Northeast 10 this week.
God bless that dude. I think Paul might be the dean of columnists by now.
I think he's the original. He goes back to the days when, we didn't have a writer for every conference and you just had one for each region. And Paul covered the whole Northeast region.
Okay. Wow.
Chuck, did you have a typewriter when you started?
Did I? Paul might have. Paul might have had an inkwell and a quill, writing on scrolls
by candlelight.
This thing.
That's right. So, all right. Let's see. What else do I got on tap? Oh, the Red Tail Classic is on right now. At the half, Fort Valley's winning 3-0. For those of you who are interested in that, it would be awesome.
Brandon, when do we get to talk about the sun I got yesterday at Augustana on my forehead? I just thought I'd point that out.
There's not enough sun to
apparently we're not going to. Okay.
No, we're not. No.
Chuck, where's your cat at?
She's right here.
Awesome. All right, man.
Your cat's gonna have its own Twitter feed in a minute.
She's gonna pick
Chuck's cat.
She's gonna pick the Carson Newman game this week instead of myself. I'm gonna let her pick it.
That's probably a good idea.
Chris, if you'd like to create a login while we're doing this, feel free to.
I'm thinking about it.
All right, so let's look at games coming up this week. I've got 5 that we're going to pick the winners of. For you guys who are unprepared to pick winners, that's too bad. We're going to do it anyway, and we're gonna stake our name to that. But let's look at some of the top games before we pick the games of the week and the winners. And Devin's going to have to join us and do this as well. All right. So Truman State is at Wayne State. Truman did well at Davenport, winning a game there. Will also at Wayne State narrowly lost to Slippery Rock. By the way, let's circle back to that. I think if Slippery Rock's a top 10 team, they've got to dominate Wayne State. Now, Wayne State's not a bad program, very inconsistent, and once in a while they'll have a good year, but I think you got to handle Wayne State better than Slippery Rock did if you want to be a top 10 program.
Again, the unknowns, right? I mean, Slippery Rock had new quarterback and they had their ups and downs, and you saw, towards 2018 or 2019, they did manhandle them. So it's clearly a drop off there, and hope that they can pick it up as the season goes on. But yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and then the next couple of weeks will tell us, is part of that because Wayne State's a lot better than we think they are. We don't really know the answer to that yet.
Or Slippery Rock's not a top 10 team.
I think that's
Right.
the answer. I think that's the answer. I know that they have a lot coming back, but I really think Roland Rivers was extremely important because with that one player, they had their best season ever by far. And without him, they've had good players before. They've had NFL players before. And I just do not see I just think he was too big of a piece. So that'll play out, and one of us will be right and one of us will be wrong. All right. Sorry. Somebody want to add something? No worries. All right. North Greenville is at Newberry. This is probably one that Chuck or Justin should talk about.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go to that game this weekend. I saw North Greenville just last night against Limestone. And, again, like Chris has been saying about a lot of things, so many unknowns. There are a lot of unknowns about North Greenville. They didn't have a great season in 2019. They're very up and down. Any given year, they can have a really good team and be successful. And then, the next year they might be a 3 or 4 win team. So they've been up and down a lot. And of course, they're still fairly new to the GSC, and joining that conference is, good luck. But they've at least been competitive in that league. And they had a very good night last night. They've got a transfer quarterback who can really play. And they have a couple of really, really shifty ball carriers. So Newberry's on a roll. They won 5 games in the spring. They won yesterday at Barton. They look like a much better, more well-prepared team than I've seen in the last couple of years. So my instincts say North Greenville probably a little further ahead right now. But at Newberry is not easy at night. It's a small stadium, but it's very intimate. It gets packed in. It can get loud if they have a loud crowd there. So it's not an easy place to play. So it's going to be an interesting game. I would take North Greenville in that, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great game.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
No, I agree, Chuck. I think the question I have going into it is North Greenville, like you said, they've been up and down the last couple of years, and to me, they're just not proven yet. Newberry, the winning 5 games in the spring, and then how they went out and beat Barton so soundly yesterday. I'm kind of the opposite of you right now, and I know I'm the Gulf South columnist, but if I was going to pick it right now, without doing a lot more research, I'd give the edge to Newberry. I think, especially there at their place at night at the graveyard. It's I would take Newberry, I think, over North Greenville right now without diving into it too much.
Yeah, the graveyard. If you know, you know, right?
Exactly. If you know, you know.
The sandbaggers. All right. Let's move on to Midwestern State at Texas A&M Commerce. Midwestern State struggled with Quincy, which is not a good indicator that the program is back to the level at which they used to play. And Texas A&M Commerce coming off the win at Pueblo. It's an interesting game, but anybody disagree that Commerce is going to come out ahead in that one? All right.
No, I just mentioned real quickly that it is a neutral site game, and I think that's starting to come out more in that rivalry after what happened a couple of years ago, where they couldn't find a place to play and they met, at North Texas. So I think it's kind of nice that they're continuing that now. But yeah, I don't think that Northwestern is going to have. Midwestern is going to have the horses to go with Commerce here.
Okay. Saginaw Valley is going to be at Bowie, or is the game at Bowie or at Saginaw?
It's at Bowie State.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Bowie.
Saginaw Valley is going to be at Bowie State. Chris, what do you think of that one?
It's going to be really interesting. Bowie State's kind of like that rare CIAA team that actually can go toe-to-toe with some of the mid-level schools in other conferences. Historically, the CIAA has not done very well out of conference, and we kind of saw that even this past weekend. But I think Bowie State has a really good chance to at home to knock off a Saginaw. If you think about what happened this past week, there wasn't a lot of offense when they went to Texas A&M Kingsville, even though Saginaw won that game. So, going to Bowie they have a really stout defense. I think they're going to be really prepared. I really do think, and I feel confident to say that I think Bowie has a real shot to beat them here.
All right, man, here's what we're going to do now. Let's move on to the 5 games that I have chosen to be the games of the week. And we'll talk about them, and we're also going to pick them. So I'll write down our picks as we go. And we'll make sure that I ridicule you all next week when I go 5-0, and the rest of you are smoked by me. All right.
We're just glad that you're making picks this time, Brandon.
Well, it's much easier not to, but all right. But I want to bring it, if you guys didn't know, Devin Albertson, the MIAA columnist, and whatever else he wrote in his bio that we can't pick up, had joined us. And one of the games that I found interesting this week is Nebraska Kearney against Pitt State. Devin, what do you think of that game? And then we'll come back and pick them later. But tell us a little bit about that game.
Well, Nebraska Kearney a couple years ago played quite well, a lot better than what they had in the first few years in the MIAA. Even beat Northwest a couple of years ago, which is a huge win for that program. They came out week 1. They beat up on Missouri Southern, kind of as expected with that. But the big story was Pitt State came out, played at Central Missouri, and kind of whooped up on them a little bit. And that was kind of an eye-opening thing for the whole conference because the MIAA is looked at as a stronger conference when Northwest and Pitt State are at the top. Even though Fort Hays and Emporia and teams like that have had good years in the recent past, whenever it's Pitt State and Northwest at the top of the conference, it just looks better to the people outside the MIAA kind of deal. So I think Pitt State showing that strength last week is really good for the conference. This should be a really fun matchup. I haven't been able to dive really deep into it, but I'm probably leaning Pitt State here early on in the week. I'm going to go through the numbers a little more as the week goes on, but it should be a really fun matchup in the MIAA in week 2.
Okay, well, you've got a little bit of time to figure it out because you're going to make a selection, whether you want to or not. Here a little later.
I'll take Pitt State. I'll take Pitt.
All right.
Hey, Devin, let me ask you, being a Northwest alum, I can't help but notice you've got some Pitt State colors behind you in the back. Is that right? Is that what I'm seeing behind you?
That'd be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, I thought that was a Pitt State banner for a minute. I thought maybe you jumped on the Gorillas bandwagon all of a sudden.
No, it's green on Saturdays and red on Sundays. So
fair enough.
All right, very good. Second game that I think is interesting. Ferris State and Ashland. I thought Ashland and Notre Dame was interesting. I had mentioned I thought maybe Ashland was left out of the rankings at the beginning of the year. I think we're going to find the answer to Ashland in season game 2 of the season because they lose that game. First of all, they probably don't belong, and second of all, 2 losses already really going to hurt them for the playoffs. Anybody have a strong opinion on that one or any insight on that one before we move on? Judging by the group in here, I didn't figure we did. All right. Now, Whit, you're going to have to tell us. Minnesota State will play Minnesota Duluth. Both teams 1-0. What are your early thoughts on that game?
Well, Duluth's head coach, Kurt Weezy, is 0-5. Against Mankato in his time as head coach. I don't know if there's ever been a case where he's got a more winnable ball game here against Mankato. They got to come up there. Duluth had a strong showing at Upper Iowa, a game that they had to avenge a loss from the previous 2019 season. And they've got John Larson, their star quarterback, up and healthy. When he's healthy, Duluth is a top 25 team. So I think it's a really good test, maybe even a better game than I originally anticipated before the season. If Mankato can get things to gel pretty quickly and be much safer with the football, I think that they can still have a lot of success offensively. But I think it's a really good game, one of the best games of the week. As for picking a winner right now, I'm going to actually take Duluth in what would be considered an upset. I got them winning at home and basically having things a little bit more ready-made for success right now, maybe.
Okay, very good. So let's talk about, before we all make our picks, let's look at Kutztown and IUP. Former PSAC columnist Chuck Bender, former Pennsylvania resident. Do you have any initial thoughts on that game? I bet you have more in-depth thoughts than me, but so go ahead.
Well, first thing that comes to mind is that Kutztown played Assumption this past weekend. IUP did not play. We could chronicle some of their opportunities to have played this past weekend, but we'll just let that lay.
No. There's a group in the chat that does not want to let that sleeping dog lie.
Very understandably so. But the point is, IUP has not played. They haven't played since the end of 2019. Kutztown played last week. So just given, how much has changed since then, the fact that these teams have so little experience on the field, that one game could be a really big advantage for Kutztown. No, I'm going to go with IUP. I think that their talent level is just so much higher.
All right. Very good. All right. And we'll see. That's going to sound all right. And what I think will be the most interesting game of the week for the second week in a row involves CSU Pueblo. They are going to be at Grand Valley. So the Lakers, dodging opponents all week long, will finally be forced to play on Thursday, and will host the Thunderwolves.
They're going to try to get out of it. There's going to be a COVID outbreak in Allendale.
So this is the kind of this is the kind of game that I love and makes Division II interesting to me. I want more of this. I understand why people, coaches don't, but to me, this is what makes your football worth following. This is extremely interesting, and no matter the outcome, I mean, we all win. Now, CSU Pueblo has the same issue that Ashland does right now, because they could start the season 0-2 and be on the outside looking in for the playoffs. And one of the things that people in Division I talk about is that an expansion of their playoffs, they say the regular season is not as meaningful. And I disagree. I think that perspective is totally wrong, because here we are in week 2 with the team talking about playoffs right now. And that's with 28 teams getting in, not just 6 or 8 or even 16. And I think we have a very meaningful regular season. But again, looking at this game, Grand Valley chance to go 1-0. They will not have played for a while. Pueblo does have a game under their belt. And but at the same time, it's almost a must win for CSU Pueblo, because they would still have to face Colorado School of Mines, which would be a toss-up game in their own conference. Matt, I want to talk to you about the playoffs, not necessarily this game, but last year, how many 3-win teams snuck in, or 3-loss teams, snuck in the playoffs in Super Region 4? Was it
Sioux Falls did, and the thing is that there was actually, you also had Winona State, Bemidji State, and Duluth all sitting there with 3 losses. So it kind of speaks to some of the challenges that you run into at the end of the line. But there's been plenty of years where 3 losses doesn't cut it either. So only 2 losses is what you got to be at. So this becomes a real. These kind of games become big games, no doubt about it.
Very good. All right, men. All right, going to go ahead and make your picks now. Let's go in order. Chuck, or at least in the order I see it. Chuck, who is the winner of Kutztown and IUP?
IUP.
Okay. Matt.
I will also take the IUP.
Okay. Devin, you guess what? You get to pick.
IUP.
All right. How could you do that? Everybody else has picked it. Justin?
I'm going to go against the grain and go Kutztown.
Okay. And Chris?
IUP.
All right. Chris Ferguson. And I'm going to pick IUP as well. All right. I was trying to get somebody to go.
You got me taking them.
All right.
Hey, I saw
Let's go.
Chuck and Matt and other stuff. I'm like, hey, they should like IUP. I think I do too. So
Okay. Let's go Ferris and Ashland. And I'll go first, and I will pick Ferris. Is anybody going to pick against Ferris in this one?
No.
Okay.
I'm not.
Now,
not today.
yeah, okay. No. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So we got Kutztown, IUP, Ferris, and Ashland. All right. Just because it's an interesting game doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have a predicted outcome or a likely outcome. All right. Joe, quickly to answer your Eric, to answer your question. There will be exemptions for the playoffs, or they will request exemptions for the playoffs. If you only get 9 games, I think that's highly likely they're going to treat this the way they would have treated a weather cancellation like lightning in the past. That was a comment from the comment section. All right, now let's go back to the picks. Let's go Minnesota State and Minnesota Duluth. All right. Yeah. Who will go first? Matt, you start this one.
Well, given all the threats I've gotten in the last 5 minutes via text message,
We got to give him a security detail.
I'm staying with Duluth.
Okay. Okay. Chris.
I'm going with Duluth as well. Duluth as well.
Okay.
I picked up somebody
Okay.
from their team on my fantasy team.
Oh, now you're gonna be getting the messages now. Okay.
All right, Justin.
Duluth.
Duluth. Okay. Okay. Devin Albertson.
I was going to go against the grain, but I guess someone else is going to pick Duluth. I mean, I am too. So I think Minnesota Duluth bounce back year for them.
Okay. Okay.
This is going up on the Mankato bulletin board as we speak, but keep going.
Good deal.
Hey, no one knows these teams from a columnist perspective. No one knows these teams better than Witt, so that's almost enough to sway me. But I'm going to go Mankato.
Okay. And Chuck, I'm going to go Mankato too. I agree with you. All right. What we got next? MIAA, Nebraska, Kearney, and Pitt State. Devin already said he was going to pick Pitt State.
Yep.
Okay. So that's Devin. All right. And let's go in reverse order this time. Justin.
I'd say Pitt State.
Okay. All right. Just so you know, anybody watching, these guys had no clue they were going to have to do this tonight. So, all right, Chris.
I'm going to go with Pitt as well.
Okay. Chuck, how about you?
So I've not had to pick many Pitt State games in the past, but when it has come up and I've had to pick, every time I've put my faith in Pitt State, they've let me down. So I'm going to go Kearney.
Okay. And I will.
It breaks my heart. I really like the Pitt program a lot. I really do. But I've not had success picking them, so we'll go Kearney.
They're one.
I
of the
think
blue
Pittsburgh
bloods.
has heard you hate their whole program and picking against them. So
I got the helmet up there on the shelf, man.
it's a good looking helmet.
All right.
I like the script.
All right, let's go ahead and look at the last one.
By the way, I'll take Pitt State. Don't mind me at all.
He just assumed your pick will be wrong.
Well, you know, guys, I call,
Am I still in one of the boxes, or have I disappeared yet?
I called on who I care about, so I already got you guys out of the way. All right. So let's
I
go
might
ahead.
be hurt by that.
It's impossible. All right, let's CSU Pueblo and Grand Valley. Who wants to go first? Chuck, you go first on this one.
I would be tempted to go Pueblo if they'd been able to do a little bit more offensively this past weekend, but I have to go Grand Valley.
Okay. And Devin.
I'm going to go Pueblo.
Okay. Awesome. And Whit.
Well, Chuck stole my script on this one, but I just don't think that they have enough offense to win that game. So I'm going to be taking Grand Valley as well, even though I said they shouldn't be ranked last week. I will, if they win this game, I'll rank them. How's that sound?
That's fantastic. I'm sure they're waiting on.
I'm sure.
Yes. So, all right, with bated breath for your vote. Chuck, what do you think?
Didn't I pick this one?
Did you?
Yeah, we're in the bottom two
Grand
now.
Valley.
Okay, Justin. Justin, I really do care about you. Don't earlier there was clearly I don't care about Matt, but you I do. That's just a mistake.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. So who you like for this one?
This tough one. This is the one that I'm gonna say Grand Valley right now, but not having seen them play.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be close, but Grand Valley.
I think it's going to be Grand Valley as well.
Okay.
It's the private jet. Got him.
The private jet. That's awesome. Who dropped the private jet? Was that you, Devin?
Yeah.
Devin, was that you? All right, great.
Yep.
So who's packing the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? That's another inside joke. So, and then I will pick Grand Valley as well. So Devin was the one to go against the grain. So, and yes, champ. We were going to initially, I talked about it because we really haven't planned this out that much, is let the commenters pick for the fans, kind of take a poll, but not that many people are commenting. So champ, would you be willing to make the picks? You can comment in the comments. If not, we'll just roll without it.
Hey, they're going to let the private jet do the flyover for the game, it looks like. The comments. They're letting the private jet do the flyover before the game. That's pretty cool.
There you go. So back in the day, this is before Witt was in Division II. In 2006, Northwest played Grand Valley in the championship. And Northwest had a couple of players. The uniforms were like 2 years old. And some of the jerseys had like frayed numbers. It's a physical game. You're going to have frayed numbers, and they were 2 years old, Grand Valley. So it became a joke that Grand Valley flew in on private jets and Northwest didn't have any money and they had to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches while Grand Valley was having everything catered. And that's where some of those inside jokes came from. So.
Yep, the poor Bearcats.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm sure everybody's feeling sorry for them. So they just got $1 million locker room. So,
endowment.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I don't think Champ wants to pick, and that's no big deal. We got 6 pickers. Really, it doesn't matter. It's just a chance for us to ridicule each other next week, which should be fun. All right. So I've got that's everything on my agenda, guys. Do you have anything we missed?
So one thing real quick, Brandon, Wayne Gilmore asked if I had coached John Brown. John was there before me. He was there a couple years before me. I coached Keyshawn Taylor, Craig Rucker, Jamel Harbison, just a couple of guys I coached when I was there. But John was there a couple years before me. And Denzel Good was there when I was there as well.
John Brown was really good. He was so good.
He was.
You guys might not know who Craig Rucker is or Javon Harbison, but they're ballers.
Rucker was on my fantasy team, and I know there was a stat line one time where he was like, the guy passed a touchdown, caught a touchdown, rushed for a touchdown in a single game. I mean, he did everything. Swiss Army knife. It was amazing.
He did. He was phenomenal. He was a lot of fun to coach because you just never knew what was going to come next.
I wonder if some of our viewership is wondering what Chris means by fantasy team in D2, because I think there's a certain portion of folks who may not know of that at all. So, Chris, we might need you to reveal some of that on a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real briefly. There are a few of us that do fantasy football at the Division II level, and it's about eight of us to do it. And I participated for the last 5 or 6 years. It's a lot of fun unless you can kind of keep up with what's going on around the country. So it's a very niche thing, but really cool, and you can get some really eye-popping stats. The shootout games that we kind of saw even this week with Notre Dame and Ashland, it's something to keep up. I think if you're a fantasy football watcher, I really do think that Duluth Mankato is going to be really, really interesting to see a lot of fireworks. So.
No, the reason, Matt, I had texted you, the reason I asked is that I lost connection. I wanted to make sure that everybody got to see Justin's answer about John Brown. Did that go through? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like totally lost connection where everybody's screaming. That's awesome. So anything else, man?
Real quick, just
does anybody else have
reply to one comment asking about Gannon winning at Northwood. Certainly not a game that moves the needle in the national landscape, but Gannon really needed to win. Beating Northwood doesn't put you in the top 25, but Gannon really needed to win. They're one of the only PSAC teams that actually made an effort to have a season in the spring. They played a couple of games. They tried to play, I think 4 or 5. They played Davenport twice, and I think they were able to play Mercyhurst. Some mixed results there. Not a great spring, but they learned a little bit about themselves, and it was a good win for them. It's not going to get a lot of attention around the nation, but they needed that. It was a good win for them. So Lee, that's what I think.
All right, Fort Valley just went up 13-0 over Tuskegee in the Red Tails Classic. All right, man. I don't have anything else. I think that'll probably do it for tonight. Am I missing anything that we talked about?
I just want to mention really quickly. So 3 of the 4 columnists for the Super Region 2 are on here right now. There's some really intriguing games going on this week between Valdosta going to Virginia Union. That'll be really interesting measuring stick for Virginia Union because we kind of saw how Valdosta just absolutely just handed Savannah State all their belongings and kicked them out of the stadium.
They sure did.
But I think that the one that's really, really interesting is Fayetteville State and Wingate, because last year they came within 10 points. Each year they've been creeping closer and closer. And I think this is probably the year that Fayetteville State has a team that if they're going to win a game against Wingate, this is the year. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting, even though it's on the road. So really a lot of implications in Super Region 2 this particular weekend.
Good chance for a big bounce back week for the CIAA. I think you're right, Chris. Wingate and Fayetteville know each other well. They've played a lot, and I think it's probably been a while since Fayetteville was really a threat to win in the fourth quarter. But that's never an easy game for Wingate. It hasn't been for the last several years. So be a tough one. Wingate still has some youth in some areas. So I think that'll be very competitive. I don't think Virginia Union can really make enough of an effort to beat Valdosta, but it's still going to be really interesting to see how well they measure up. Can they give them a game? It's going to be a long road trip for Valdosta. It's at Hovey. It's a tough place to play. It's a good home field environment there. So good opportunity for them to at least earn some respect with a good showing.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. That's one thing that we didn't really talk about this week was Valdosta and them laying the wood to Savannah State at home. I think there were some question marks. At least I had some questions going into it, just with Rogan Wells' departure and Ivory Durham filling in, and what was that going to look like. But I don't think there's any question now what that looks like and what Valdosta State's offense is going to look like going forward. So they impressed me a lot, and I thought Savannah State is a good team. I don't think they're a bad team. I think Valdosta is poised to make a run this year.
And it felt like that was also kind of a game where, they didn't want to show too much. I think it was 30-0 at halftime. And it kind of felt like they went pretty basic, and it's like, hey, we got what we want out of this game. We have some big ones coming up, and they didn't even show us what they've really got. So I think they might have to show us a little bit more this weekend. So yeah, this is going to be interesting.
There were some turnovers early that Valdosta scored on, and like you said, Chuck, it was 30-0 at the half, and it wasn't. Coming out of the locker room was a completely different story. So, yeah.
Well, Chuck is no different with Lenore Ryan. I mean, they absolutely manhandled Virginia State, and it was just really ugly on Virginia State's part with a lot of turnovers, a lot of newer players on offense. But I mean, Lenore Ryan looked really, really good, and I think they kind of have a take no prisoners attitude right now. So I'm really looking forward to see how they progress through their conference schedule.
All right. Well,
yeah, man.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Well, man, that's going to do it tonight. Appreciate all you coming in, Justin.
I wanted to watch for One thing to watch with the MIAA this week, it is Fort Hays playing at Missouri Western. Both teams are 0-1. Kind of like before with Pueblo, if they want to make a playoff push, it's kind of do or die time at this point. I know Fort Hays lost to Northwest last week, didn't show a whole lot on offense, but if they want to make a push to the playoff, they need to win this week or else they could be 0-2 and kind of out of it at this point. So just one thing to watch. Also, Northwest not playing this week because Lincoln had COVID. So a game without no game for the Bearcats this week.
Forgot to mention that. Anyway, I've had a blast. We'll do this again next week. Just a reminder, and I'm not good at this. I'm not good at the promotion part of this. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. All the YouTube dudes always say that. The subscribers would be great. And we need to increase that so that we can let you know when we're going to be live. So, but in any case, wanted to thank Devin, wanted to thank Justin and the Sunday night crew. We'll go ahead and get out of here, and we'll see you next week at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us, guys.